When this buyer walked into my house with their realtor, they negotiated their offer on my home right in front of the camera.
Ask all the questions, no matter if it's a ouch, it's a sting, you might get a gut punch, but you need to know.
You need somebody who knows our area and who knows, how to push us to the end and get us to the closing table.
Welcome to the Closing Table Podcast, real accounts from real estate professionals brought to you by Windowstill. I'm Kat Schooler, and I've talked to a lot of real estate agents this year, and I've gone through and combed through our conversations to bring to you their best home buying advice. So whether you're a first-time home buyer or it's been a while since you purchased your last home and you feel like the market has changed, trust me, it has. This episode is full of valuable advice, from where to start on your home search to what you should be looking for during home tours, what you should definitely not do during home tours, and stick around to the end if you are considering a major relocation. We have so much valuable information for you. So let's jump right in. There was one video I saw you posted, I think it was fairly recently, about showings and how you shouldn't maybe talk too negatively during a showing because the sellers might have a home security system and they could kind of hear the things you're saying. Can you talk about that? Because that fascinated me.
Yeah, so that's actually personal experience. When I put my house up, my first house up for sale, I've always had cameras inside my home just because I'm trying to make sure Cookie Monster is safe when I leave him at home. And that's just like a helicopter mom thing. But I've always had cameras in my house. So, and the cameras are out in the open. They're not hidden. And, as a realtor, we always have to make sure that the listing also says that there is audio and video recording at all times. So that was also noted in the listing. But for whatever reason, when this buyer walked into my house with their realtor, they negotiated their offer on my home right in front of the camera. And like right in front of it. Like it was out in the open, my camera was sitting right there, and they were like, hey, we want to come in at X and initially, and if they're not okay with that, then we'll go up to this number. And so I heard that entire negotiation. So when they sent me the offer, I countered immediately at the second offer that they said they were open to going up at. So I took that experience, and I always make sure to tell all my clients now, like, hey, when we walk in, like, we can't say a word. So if you're feeling a certain way about an offer, if you're feeling a certain way about the home, if it isn't positive, if it's not going to flatter the home, it's just something that we need to leave until we get out of the door. And even past the door, because there are Ring doorbells now. So like we need to make sure we're like away from the home completely before we start to talk about, just really anything that's going on with the house. So and it's crazy how sometimes like how quickly people forget, like you'll walk into a home and it immediately doesn't smell good. And your first instinct is like, oh my God, like, why does it smell like this? And I'm always just like, no, don't. Like, don't say it. Like, don't say a single word. Because, like, people are so attached to their homes. I've heard a statistic once that said, selling or moving is either the second or third hardest thing after, like, death and divorce. And I forgot exactly what it was, but it's definitely after, like, one or two of those things. And, to think that someone is parting with their house and then they're hearing you come into their home and say something negative. It could be the simplest thing. You could say maybe you don't like the color of their walls. Maybe they painted the color of their walls that color because of a memory or because of something they did with their family. And if you come in and you say something negative, they could easily be like, well, that person who wrote that offer on my house had something negative to say about my home and I don't even want them living there anymore. Just because people get so emotional about these things. So the last thing we want is for anyone to just say anything negative while they're inside a home or talk about offers. That's always the big one too. Just because we definitely don't want to we don't want to show all our cards. And the last thing we want to do is just do it outward on a camera, because it can be a pretty fortunate situation for the listing agent. So we don't ever want to do that.
Yeah, it makes sense when you explain it all like that. But yeah, to your point, how quickly you forget, or you were just off the cuff, but it can obviously work against you in the same way that, like, when people write like a buyer's letter, that works for you, right? You're playing on the emotions, but in this case, like, not in a good way.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, there are a couple different like showing strategies and showing tactics. So I love when I have a new client and they ask me some of those questions. Like, I just recently had a client who did ask me, like, do we need to be dressed up, when we go to showings? Like, is there a certain form of attire? And I always say, like in my buyer consultation, like you want to be as comfortable as possible. You want to have shoes that slip on and slip off. So I love when, I love when I get those questions. And, sellers have, similar questions too, where they say like, when are people going to walk into my home? Like, are they going to be turning off the lights? Are they going to be leaving things open? And, sometimes they're like, what if I can't show the house? What do I do? And I'm just like, you just say no. You just say no, you propose a new time. So, yeah, it's always nice to be able to get in front of all those questions like earlier on. So, bringing it back to social media, if that's something like it's something we're aware of because they're conversations we're having. So if it's something you want to just get in front of, on social media, why not? I recently posted a video where I walked through a home and I said, you should be looking under rugs and you should be looking under plants. And, you should be looking under anything that is directly tied to the floor because you never know what's under it. And I think that video got the most engagement that I have on YouTube because people were like, oh yeah, I bought a house and like when the seller moved out, like everything was moved out and the stuff that was going on under the rug was crazy. And so yeah, like my clients know when I'm walking into homes, I'm lifting up rugs. My sellers also know when I'm going to do a listing appointment, if I see rugs or if I see plants, I'm moving them out of the way just because I want to get out of the way of what could potentially happen when they go to move and there's something under them. So yeah, they're just like really simple things that you don't really, you just don't really remember or think about until like something happens to you. And pretty much everything that comes out of my like calls and, interactions with my clients is from a personal experience that has happened to me. I've had situations where we moved into a home and lifted up the rug during the final walkthrough and, found like massive amounts of like water stains, so you just want to be really mindful of them.
That is also great advice. And I saw that video and I saw the comments, and one person was even like, I once looked at a house and under the rug on the deck or something like that, there was like a big hole in the deck they were covering with the rug and furniture.
Yeah, and that's wild. Like
people.
a whole hole. Like, come on. Like that's insane. So yeah, it happens. Yeah, it's kind of crazy like what you can find at houses. And sometimes like people think like, the seller might do things on purpose. Like maybe the hole in the deck situation was on purpose because that seems a little weird. But sometimes like, an inspector will go into an attic and they'll find like a ton of mold. And I'm like, when's the last time you were in your attic? Like I bought my house 3 years ago. I haven't been in my attic in the last 3 years. I don't know what's going on up there. A squirrel could have like created a whole family up there. Like I don't know. And I wouldn't know, because I don't normally just get up there. So typically when we do the inspection and we come back, we're kind of almost telling the seller like, hey, these are things that we found that you've been essentially living with. So usually a good seller will say like, hey, like, I didn't even know that was happening. So I have no problem getting those things repaired or fixed. So yeah, there's people who don't know about things and they're just like kind of like shocked by it and they want to make sure that the buyer is going into a good home and they want to have that good faith. But then there are people who just kind of want to wash their hands with it. So sometimes those things can be new. And that's always something, I help buyers understand too, because I think, tying it back to the emotions, like buyers are like, sometimes they think like, sellers are out to get them, or sellers think that buyers are out to get them because they're asking for all these things, but they're really like new things that no one has really even thought about or even knew about. So the goal is to just kind of get both parties to a place where, we can help them kind of bridge the gap of like the emotions and just get to like that original goal of getting into this home and getting the home sold.
There's no fluffing when it comes to real estate. You have to say, hey, it's this or that. So your clients know, okay, it's this or that. And that's really about it. You can't, what they say, black and white, you can't go gray.
That's good advice.
Yeah, you can't go gray in real estate. It's black or white. Because when it comes down to the terms, the contract, the purchase agreement, all those things, and then when it comes down to the deal closing, you want to make sure all the T's are crossed, right? All your I's are dotted, all the punctuation marks are where they need to be, and everybody at the end of the day walks away satisfied. And I think to me that's the bigger thing. Like everybody walks away satisfied. Like I'm not one of those agents that and I've seen this before. I've seen agents try to push properties on folks. I don't do that, because at the end of the day, guess what? I can't count your pockets.
Yeah.
I can't count your pockets. I don't know how much money you bring. I don't know how much money you bringing in. I don't know your credit score like that, because that's between you and the lender. I don't ask for that information. I don't want that information. Only thing I need is that you're pre-approved. Okay, cool. You're pre-approved. So if you're pre-approved, then this is what you can do. And then we walk that line. One of the things is with my clients, I give them homework, to be honest. When we first start, I give them homework.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I give them homework. I say, hey, you want to buy a house. This is your first, like, especially for a new first time home buyer. Hey, you want to buy a house. Congratulations. I'm excited for you. I'm glad that you picked me, right? I'm happy that I was somebody that you picked. So with that being the case, I got some homework for you. I want you, with your design budget of what you say you have, I want you to go on Zillow, go on realtor.com, look up that price range for those homes. Look to see what desired areas that you may want to look at. Look at those areas, look at those homes, see what those homes offer for that price range. Let me know if you're comfortable with what you see. So, for example, you may come to me and say, hey, I want a 3-bedroom home, 1.5 or 2 bathrooms. I want a finished basement. And I say, okay, cool. Now, does this home has to be updated, modern, turnkey ready? Or if the kitchen is, say the kitchen was remodeled 10 years ago, are you comfortable with that? Say the basement ain't finished. What if it don't have a garage? Are you cool with that? I give you this information because I want you to make the decision saying, yes, I'm cool with it or I'm not cool with it, because that's going to determine what we start searching for. So
That's really cool advice of like just going out there and looking to see what's out there in your price range with kind of your wants list,
right.
right? Because I think for some people, the real estate market can be really shocking, especially maybe a first time buyer. And someone might think, especially maybe in this world of a lot of people working from home, they might want 4 bedrooms, right? Because, well, they want their primary and then they want a guest room. And then, like, say both of the couple works from home. So we want 2 offices. Well, you're either going to have small rooms, right? Or you're going to have a bigger budget.
Right. So you have to be more realistic with what you're looking for, what you want. So I try to make you get more realistic about what it is that you're looking for. Like, for example, I had a couple that we just closed on yesterday. We started in January. We found that we started in January, mid-January. We were looking for properties, and they had a budget already set. So we went and looked at about maybe, I say it had to be like maybe 10 homes. And everything we came across was cool, but it wasn't exactly what they were looking for. So I asked them, I said, we came across 10 houses, and I mean, they're okay houses. I said, but it's not what y'all looking for based off of what y'all told me. And it was just like, yeah, I don't know about this. So I said, well, you know, I said, look, go back. It was a husband and wife team. I said, go back, talk it over. And if y'all want to hold off on if y'all want to hold off, cool, because I'm not gonna force you. But just go back and talk. Be more realistic about what it is that y'all looking for. So they came back to me and was like, hey, we're thinking about maybe upping the budget. So I said, okay. I said, what are you thinking? They said, well, I don't know what you think. I was like, I don't know your money. I can't, I can't count your pockets. I said, the only thing I can do is I can hold a conversation with the lender. You can hold a conversation with the lender to see where realistically where you can go. So I shot a text message to the lender. He said, "Oh man, they can go way past that if they want to." He said, "They just said that." I said, "Oh, okay." So I said, "Y'all need to talk to the lender." So they talked to the lender, and the lender, and they was like, they came back and like, "Hey, we can go up actually 30,000. We didn't know that. We just thought." And I said, "Cool." I said, I said, "So how did y'all come up with y'all budget originally?" And they were just like, we just threw a number out there and just said, "Nope, we ain't going past this." And I was just like, "Oh, okay." It makes sense. Okay. But when they went up 30,000 in their budget, because realistically they could do that, they could afford that. It wasn't going to be tight for them. We found a house in a week.
Wow.
We found the house in a week that they were looking for, and it fit everything on their checklist. So, like I tell people, I say, hey, one, be realistic. If you're realistic about your budget, if you're realistic about what you want and what you can deal with, then it makes it easier on the agent side to actually try to go find that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times a lot of times clients, they'll say, I want this, but realistically, yeah, that's not what it is, right? You can't do that. We can do this. You can build up to this, or you can have this later in the future. But realistically, let's really concentrate on where we are right now. And that's where I really try to express to my client. It makes me think about, because I also teach these classes, like professional development, and
Oh,
career
cool.
readiness things. So in one of my classes, I always use this example. I say, if you worked in California and say you were, I think I used the example of a nurse. Say you were a nurse, and say in California you're making, as a nurse, you're making 80,000, but that's in California. You move back to Michigan. There's two totally different states, two totally different costs of income. So if you're used to 80,000 in California, when you get to Michigan and you realize that nurses don't make 80,000, or that particular field don't make 80,000, that particular field they make 65,000. You have to be realistic with your budget, because there's difference between California and Michigan. The cost of living in California is higher than the cost of California and Michigan. So since the cost is different, the reality is different. So I use that as an example in my class. Like, when you're researching, you have to be realistic. You have to be realistic about what it is that you can afford, what you need, and move forward that way. So yeah. So I kind of put that with my clients.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, like you're not a lender and you don't know people's numbers, but how do you think maybe people could be more empowered to be more inquisitive with their lenders so that they can kind of help their agents give them a larger menu, right? Because your most recent clients, they just picked a number and the lender said good, and they probably just like walked out of there like, cool, yeah, and like nothing more was said. And when they started to ask questions, well, that opened up a world of possibilities. So I think like these are big numbers for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
right? A house is a huge purchase.
It
Like,
is.
how do you think someone can feel more comfortable kind of talking about these big numbers?
I mean, I think, like you said, when it comes to making a purchase of a house, that's a big deal. That's a big decision for you to be a homeowner. And I think that's when you have to put all cards on the table, right? And be your most vulnerable. And ask all the questions, no matter if it's a ouch, it's a sting, you might get a gut punch, but you need to know. because of because of the steps that you're about to take, how we're about to walk this road, which is a journey. um, you have to be very vulnerable with yourself and the lender, so that way you can kind of have a better understanding of what it is you can actually do. And I'll just say, man, like, I remember when I was in school, my teacher was to say, you know there's nothing wrong with standing in the DQ line. And I used to be like, what does that mean, the DQ line? And And he used to always say it, and we in the class would be like, so one day we were just like, what do you mean when you say that, the DQ line? He's like, ain't nothing wrong with a dumb question. He's like, there's nothing wrong with asking a dumb question. If you don't know, you just don't know. If you're ignorant to that, then you're just ignorant to that. Ignorant doesn't mean that you're stupid, you're uneducated. Because most of the time when you hear the word ignorant, what you think? Most people think that is a negative type of thing. But if you're ignorant to something, you're just ignorant to something. You just don't know it because you never asked that question. You never dealt with that type of situation. You never been in that type of world. So there's nothing wrong with asking those type of questions. I think a lot of people be thinking like, that's a dumb question, I ain't gonna ask that, or I don't want to be that, I don't want to appear to not know. But if you don't know, you just don't know. And, and that's what it comes down to. If you don't know, you don't know. Ask the question. I got a new client that was referred to me last week. Me and her had our first conversation. I gave her the homework, and she got back to me. She said, I did my homework. And she was like, I think I'm going to have to be realistic about what my budget is. I said, cool. So she's going to actually go and talk to her lender. I suggested a few people like, hey, you hold the conversation with these folks, and whoever you go with is who you go with. I'm just giving you the information, right? So we're supposed to link back up next week, and then she's going to let me know what she wants to do and stuff like that, right? Another thing that I tell my clients, especially, there are a bunch of first-time homebuyer programs, which you can get into. But say if you don't qualify for one, I always tell my clients, hey, when you're purchasing a home as a buyer, the rule of thumb is whatever that purchase price is, times it by 6.5 to 7%. Usually that gives you a roundabout figure of how much your closing costs are. So that way you're more you're more in the loop and aware of what possibly you might have to bring to the table. And you know that up front. And if you do get into a first-time home buyers program and you're able to get 3,500 or 7,500 or 10,000, whatever the case may be, yeah, then deduct that, right? Because then that money's coming off. But that's another thing, another tidbit that I tell my clients, hey, whatever your purchase price is, times it by this, so you have an accurate idea of what it is that you might need to bring to the table.
And that's why pre-approvals are so important. And, you've got some people that are like, oh, well, I know I'm good. And I'm like, yes, but you don't exactly know your debt to income. You don't exactly with interest rates being higher, your house payment may look different than what you thought it would have a year ago. So yeah, that's why we very, very, very encourage pre-approvals. Keep them on target, look within this range that you can afford. Let's not be looking at houses that we can't afford. That doesn't do anybody good. Nobody likes looking at an Escalade and then having to go buy a Blazer.
When it comes to buyers, honestly, I think the biggest mistake that a lot of them make is this, and I don't know if my answer is going to be the same as a lot of other agents that you would ask, but I think the biggest mistake that they could make is not using a local lender. That is so important. And I know our market here is a little bit different than everywhere else, but we're a big vacation destination spot, and here we have a lot of people from other areas that are trying to buy here, and they're trying to buy condos here. And what we see a lot is they use these out of town lenders, their hometown lenders. They'll be like, oh, this lender, they've done everything for me. They have my house, they have my car, they have, everything that I've ever financed. They've done it for me. It's my hometown bank. And unfortunately, it doesn't work that way here. Our properties here are very specific types of property. We have what's called non-warrantables and condotels. And your typical lender cannot do these types of properties. And so having the conversation with them can be tough. And there's a lot of agents who also really don't know how to have that conversation properly with their clients. Because it's a sticky situation when you have someone saying like, well, I want to use this lender. And you're like, well, you can't because we're not going to be able to close. We see it happen all the time in our market. We get to like the end of the deal, and next thing you know, the lender's denying the loan because they didn't realize that it was a non-warrantable loan until they ordered the estoppel letter, which is usually done towards the end. And so it's kind of one of those things where, you know, for me, it's important to explain that to my clients up front. And not only that too, even if you're just buying a traditional, you know, regular residential home, using a local lender is still important. You need somebody who knows our area and who knows, you know, how to push us to the end and get us to the closing table. And local is just best.
You mentioned with working with relocation clients, like a lot of the times they're not in the state, right? You're doing things over FaceTime or video. So like, can we go a little more in depth on what it's like, you know, working with you, on what it's like kind of going through a major state relocation?
So it always starts off with a buyer consult call, which is usually over Zoom. And then we put together their timeline, certain areas that they're thinking about. Usually they'll do a discovery trip. Well, and I always recommend that too. So if they don't want to, I really push that, because I think, you know, FaceTime videos is fine for the property. I'm not concerned as much about the property as I am by the neighborhood, especially if you're coming from California. Like if you're coming from, a couple people came from San Diego, but most of them are from LA and Orange County, where I lived and grew up, and it's very different from San Antonio. And especially, like, I have clients right now, they're from the Bay Area and they're looking in Texas Hill Country. But I've had people that have come out here, you know, they think like, oh, I have this vision and I want to live in this big house that's out in the country, so to speak. And to me, that kind of scares me, because you haven't been here. And maybe you do want that, and you want the chickens, and you want the wildlife, and you want like the space and everything. But it's the reality check is might be 30 minutes to the nearest grocery store. You might be an hour to a Target. Like you might be like 45 minutes to a Starbucks. And are you going to be okay with that? Like I always recommend that if someone wants to go really kind of like out of the city limits, that they actually spend a week here and in that town that they're looking at, doing an Airbnb and doing the day-to-day drives. And I've saved people from, I'm not saying don't live in these towns. I'm just saying, like, I feel like people have to be a dose of reality of what it is that like their dream and what's reality. Because that might sound great, but if you literally are used to being in an urban area every single day, you might not like that. Like there's a handful of people that have done that, and they're like, oh, you know what? We don't want to live. Thank you for telling us to do that. Some of them not even a week. They'll be there for like a couple nights, and they'll say like, oh yeah, we can't live here. This is too far out. Like we need to live somewhere else. So for me, a discovery trip is really important. And to drive the different neighborhoods. New Braunfels, which is halfway between San Antonio and Austin, is super hot. A lot of people love New Braunfels. And it's great because you're halfway between Austin and San Antonio, but kind of the same thing. Like, do you want to be hanging out in New Braunfels? Because what is the realistic chance you're going to be driving to San Antonio or Austin? And maybe it is. Maybe you will drive there a lot. But like, I also have a lot of Californians that have come out here that are working from home or hybrid work from home. And telling them to like do the commute. Like if you have to be in the office in Austin once a week or twice a month, do that commute to Austin in traffic times and see if that's something that you're going to be okay with. I also have people that come out here. I've actually sold 2 homes in San Antonio to people that wanted Austin, that were very set on, we're moving to Austin. They did their exploratory trip, came out here, decided Austin was not for them. Really had to like push them to go see San Antonio. Like, just trust me on this. Like, come see San Antonio. If anything, you go to the Riverwalk and like, you know, you have like a vacation. And both of them came to San Antonio, and they ended up buying in San Antonio. And they were saying like, oh my gosh, like, thank you for telling us to come here. Like, this is great. We love San Antonio. So they do the discovery trip, they nail down the community or like a few communities that they really like. And then from there, I could run with it from there. And I do FaceTime tours live with them. I could zoom in on things, zoom out on things. Like I could just keep going, read tour for them if they want to go see another room. Um, but it's very hands-on. And then usually there's like 3 or 4 homes that they narrow down that they really like out of those FaceTimes. And then I will go over like the comparables, like what things are selling for in those particular tracks. And then once they're under contract, I'm usually the one that will be there for the inspection. Usually they don't come out even for the home inspection. So then I'll FaceTime them at the tail end of the inspection. And then the inspector will go over what he found during the inspection, ask them if they have any questions. It's pretty seamless. And then like with a new build, I sell a lot of new builds, I do the blue tape walkthrough usually, which is where you take the blue tape and you put it on different pieces around the house, whether there's imperfections. And I will FaceTime them and I'll show them like, this is what we blue taped. This is what needs to get fixed. On the punch, this is the punch list. This is what needs to be fixed. We're going to come back on this date and make sure that all these items on the punch list were taken care of. And then if they're here for the closing, in Texas, unlike California, you have a closing table. And that's always a fun experience from people from California, since we don't have that out there. And then I make it special for them. And I usually, depending on their preferences, I'll have a bottle of champagne or flowers or like a home cake or something. It's kind of like make it like a celebration. And then we'll go to the house and have a little celebration there. But that's pretty much kind of like the process.
Oh, that's great. And I love the idea of a discovery trip. Now, if when you're talking to people, if when they're like, "Ooh, discovery trip sounds good, like we're capable of taking the time to do that." And if they say like, "Can we look at houses while we're there?" What do you recommend? Do you say like, "No, not yet?"
No, I
Yeah.
do that.
Okay.
I actually am I know some realtors, now this is going to obviously change with the new rules that are coming in August. But I mean, well, yes, no. I mean, in Texas, you have most brokerages, mainstream brokerages already require in Texas to have a buyer rep agreement. So for me, like when I was in California, they called them buyer broker agreements and I never got them signed. But in Texas, like pretty much every mainstream broker in town requires you to have a buyer representation agreement. So I already have the agreement done, but I know some people like with pre-approvals or whatever, they get very funny with like, if I don't have everything in line, I'm not going to take you out. Or like until you're ready to actually pull the trigger and write an offer, I'm not going to take you out looking at homes. I'm not that strict because I feel like, especially someone coming from out of town, they do need to see what their money can get them. And then that also helps because when they leave and I'm doing a FaceTime, they've seen like the buyers, the story I was telling you about, they bought in a community in New Braunfels called Veramendi. And then they went out to this community called Meyer Ranch, which is like very far, it's very remote feeling. That was like one of those things where they were saying like, no, we can't live this far out. But they love Veramendi and they love the look of it. They love like they love the vibe of the community. And so it actually does help to like take them to certain neighborhoods. Like once they have it kind of towards the end of their discovery trip, when they kind of have it narrowed down, like this couple was saying, like, we know absolutely we want to be in Veramendi. Like this is where we want to be. Then it was totally easy to just focus on that neighborhood. And then by them seeing houses in other neighborhoods, not just Meyer Ranch, but they were like, oh, like, no, we don't really like, we don't like where this is located. So yeah, and it's resale, same thing. Like I'll take them into open houses. And and if it's not an open house, I will be honest with the agent and I will tell them, this is a preview trip, because you don't want to inconvenience sell, like you want to let them know. Like, hey, is it okay? I have clients, they're thinking of purchasing in this area. Would it be okay if I could show them the property? So I'm very transparent about that.
I think that's good. And then, like, you know, who knows? Like, maybe they could fall in love, right? You
Exactly.
never
And
know
that's
if
what
you
I
don't
tell
look.
them. No. And sometimes that's also what motivates them. Sometimes they'll be on a discovery trip and they'll say, well, we're probably going to come out here, next month. And then they fall in love with, this has also happened, but then they've fallen in love with a neighborhood and a house, and they did see the house. Like, they love the neighborhood and they love that house, and they hurry up and they write the offer.
Thank you for listening to the Closing Table podcast, brought to you by Windows Still. Please be sure you're following our podcast on Apple and Spotify. And if you're part of our YouTube audience, be sure to hit that subscribe button. If you're enjoying this podcast, please consider leaving us a comment or review. It helps us find more amazing listeners like you. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.